Travelers of Reddit, what are some of the creepiest/scariest experiences you've had abroad? The wild bus ride to Lubwe village. In June and July of 2013, I traveled to Zambia. Part of my time there was spent in a really remote village called Lubwe, which is located in the northernmost province of the country. To get to Lubwe, you have to take a long charter bus ride, about 12 hours, from Lusaka to the nearest city or village that has any kind of infrastructure. Let me set the scene. That was the worst charter bus I have ever seen. The windows were cracked open, letting cold air rush inside. There were awful smells because people were allowed to bring small animals with them on the bus. There was barely any space to move because the undercarriage was stuffed full of luggage, so everyone had to bring their extra bags inside the bus with them. The whole ride was filled with loud, non-stop music blasting from the speakers, and the front door was held closed only by a towel tied to the handrail on the stairs. The bus was so bad that it stalled 3 times before even leaving the loading area at the station. That little detail is important to remember. Our scheduled departure was 2:35 in the afternoon, but we did not actually leave the bus terminal until 4 o'clock. The group on this trip included some experienced international travelers, along with about 11 others who were pretty soft and sheltered. These folks had been handed every comfort in life and were scared of their own shadows. Everyone was uncomfortable, some more than others, and they made sure to complain about it quite a bit. Finally, we got out of the bus station and onto the road. We had to make a wide right turn. In Zambia, traffic laws do not really exist. People just drive however they want. Our bus driver and conductor fit right into that style. As we made the big turn, cutting off many cars, our bus stalled again. There were many honks, whistles, and shouts directed at us, but the bus started running again after 2 or 3 minutes. No big deal, right? Well, this is where things got interesting. Among the cars we cut off was a small group of military men. I do not know if they were from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. All I know is that they were very angry with our bus. About 6 of them were in a Hummer, waving us down and signaling for the bus to stop as we started moving again. We did not stop. The military vehicle mounted the curb and began screaming and waving for us to pull over. Our conductor opened the bus door and told them we were going to keep going. That did not work. The soldiers got down from their vehicle and made sure our bus could not move any further. At that point, our driver, conductor, a coach assistant, and a few passengers got off the bus, and a huge shouting match began. Most passengers calmed down and got back on the bus. Now, it was just the bus crew and the soldiers arguing. One soldier lifted his shirt and showed a pistol, while another flashed an AK-47 from the back of the truck. The bus crew was pulled onto the military truck and got beaten badly. I was sitting where I could see everything happen. But then, I looked up for just a second and saw 3 new men get on the bus, and suddenly it took off without warning. The old crew was left behind, and our group of 11 very confused white travelers was thrown into complete panic. It was getting dark by then, and none of us, not even the group leader who had been there a year before, knew where we were going. We were thinking maybe the bus was hijacked or that we were being taken to some sort of dungeon in the middle of nowhere in Africa. Eventually, we figured out the new men were backup drivers from the bus company as we made stops and changed passengers. But for about 2 hours, I was genuinely worried that this trip I had worked so hard to take might end in disaster. That was the most stressful travel experience I have ever had. There is one important detail I forgot to tell my mom when I told her I would be going back the next summer. Trapped in the Tokyo subway during the big earthquake, my husband had a job that lasted a whole month in Japan. My daughter and I joined him for the last week of his work there. About 2 months before our trip, my daughter and I booked tickets to go to the Ghibli Museum in Mitaka. That place is about an hour away from Tokyo by train. Since we did not know my husband's work schedule, we only bought tickets for me and my daughter. But at the last minute we found out he had the day off, so he came with us. Somehow they managed to get him a ticket too, and he joined us for the visit. We left the museum earlier than we wanted because my husband had to get back for a 5 o'clock phone call. After he got off the subway, my daughter and I planned to continue on up to Harajuku. Just 2 stops before where we would split, the train suddenly stopped without warning. A frantic announcement came over the speaker in Japanese. Right after that, the train car started shaking. And it did not stop. Kept shaking and shaking for about 10 minutes straight. My husband said he knew something was seriously wrong when he saw people pulling out their phones and texting. Something you almost never see on the subway. After about 30 minutes, the train slowly moved forward, inching to the next station. A kind woman who spoke English told us there had been a big earthquake. Because of that, all the trains were shutting down. We ended up walking about 2 miles back to our hotel, where we met up with the rest of my husband's coworkers. We had to stay in the hotel lobby for 8 hours while the building was checked for any damage. The staff needed to make sure it was safe before we could go back to our rooms. The aftershocks kept coming for the next 5 days, right up until the day we flew back home. We were actually inside the Tokyo subway during the Tohoku earthquake on March 11, 2011. Honestly, I did not start to get really nervous until they began talking about needing to take iodine tablets because of radiation coming from the power plant. It was only when we got back home and watched all the news specials about the earthquake and the tsunami that I truly understood how dangerous the situation had been. I guess my ignorance, coming from the Midwest where earthquakes are rare, helped me stay calm during the trip. Stalked in the Tiergarten. I was walking alone through the Tiergarten in Berlin, just enjoying the park and the quiet. As I walked down the path, I noticed this guy standing off to the side, looking out into the distance. I passed him, and then, about 20 feet later, he suddenly turned and started following me, matching my pace. I didn't want to freak out, so I began taking a winding route, leaving the park, then coming back in, just trying to lose him. But no matter what, the guy stayed right behind me. Finally, I reached an area with sharp turns and thick bushes. I slipped out of sight and pressed myself into a corner. Earlier on my trip, I'd bought a pocket knife in Switzerland, so I pulled it out and held it in my jacket pocket, ready if I needed it. After a minute, the guy came out of the bushes, clearly confused and trying to spot me. When he finally caught sight of me, he startled but then acted like nothing was wrong and kept walking as if he hadn't followed me. He stopped a bit ahead, and I kept an eye on him. I wanted to confront him and ask why he was following me, but I was visiting the country and didn't want to cause trouble. Eventually, a large group of people came along, so I slipped in with them. The guy started following again, but this time I managed to lose him once we left the garden. It really shook me because even now, I have no clue why he followed me. I was a guy in my early 20s, pretty fit, and definitely not the type to look like an easy target. But maybe he thought differently. The Munich station sleeper. Back in the early 90s, I was backpacking through Europe with 2 friends. Money was tight, so when we found ourselves in Munich with an early train to catch, we decided to sleep at the Hauptbahnhof, the city's main train station. We picked a quiet spot on the upper concourse where a bunch of other travelers, maybe 20 or 30, were already asleep or settling in. It wasn't too bad, all things considered. Quiet, spacious, and dimly lit. My 2 friends passed out almost immediately. Couldn't sleep. Around the middle of the night, I heard shouting echoing up from the level below. I peeked over the railing and spotted this towering, disheveled guy. Must have been close to 2 meters tall, wandering around picking fights with random strangers. He looked like something out of a horror movie. Tattered clothes, long matted hair, and the weirdest part, a surgical neck brace with a big white plastic support behind his head. Someone had drawn this grotesque face on the back of it. Totally surreal. He kept yelling, lunging at people, just generally unhinged until a few German police officers finally showed up and escorted him out. I figured that was the end of it. I was wide awake by then, basically on alert. My friends, still sleeping like babies. An hour or so later, I heard fast, heavy footsteps on the stairs. It was him, the same guy back again and now on our level. I stayed frozen. He didn't seem to notice me, just walked slowly around, stopping to lean down and examine some of the people sleeping. It was like he was choosing. Then he stopped, picked a random guy, shook him awake. As the guy groggily sat up, the tall man wound up and punched him square in the face. Hard. His nose just exploded. Blood everywhere. Chaos broke out. People were screaming. Police came sprinting up again and finally hauled the guy off. For good this time, I hoped. Paramedics arrived a few minutes later to tend to the poor guy with the shattered face. They treated him there and then took him away. And my friends? Still sound asleep. Didn't wake up for any of it. No one spoke to me afterward. Not the police, not anyone. Maybe they assumed I didn't speak German. All I know is what I saw, and I saw everything. When my friends finally did wake up, they didn't believe me at first, until I pointed out the dried pool of blood still staining the floor. I didn't sleep at all that night, not even for a second. How Gandalf saved me in Algeria. I was wandering around a town in Algeria, just exploring. I found myself walking into a neighborhood where almost no one was outside. A little further, there were literally no people around. I started feeling uneasy. Then, I noticed a very tall man walking straight toward me, like, with purpose. As he got closer, I saw he was an older guy with a long gray beard, wearing a gray tunic. I stopped. He came up to me and said, in pretty good English, "You're not safe here. We need to get you off the street." I said okay, and he told me to follow him. We walked a few blocks until we reached a door. He told me to wait, then went inside. He opened the door again and invited me in. Inside, there were about a dozen men, all dressed in black, staring daggers at me. The gray-bearded man started yelling at them, shaking his fists, getting really worked up. Then one of the younger guys went to the kitchen and brought me tea and cookies. I was trying to smile and stay calm. One of the younger guys asked where I was from. I said, "The States." Suddenly, he started talking about the CIA and all that stuff. So I fired back, "You think the CIA's bad here? Let me tell you about Central America." Pretty soon, everyone was warming up to me. We were laughing, joking about American foreign policy, and drinking tea. After a while, the older man invited me back to his apartment, which had a huge library. I gave him a book I'd finished reading. Then he told me what had really happened. His little brother, the younger guy who brought the tea, was the leader of a radical group. The other men I'd met were part of that group. Apparently, they'd been planning to kidnap me. But the older man scolded them for not being good hosts and disrespecting his house. He promised I would be safe from then on. TLDR, Gandalf saved my life in Algeria, and I gave him a copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance as a thank you. That time we got stopped by soldiers on a chicken bus. When I was a kid, my dad used to lead groups of college students on trips to Central and South America to help build houses. One year, he decided we should take the infamous chicken bus from Guatemala City all the way to Mexico City. It was a long, grueling ride. We got to the border and this soldier, I swear he was packing a massive gun, hopped on the bus and started eyeballing everyone. He noticed there were about 15 college girls on board. Then he made a phone call. About 2 minutes later, a bunch more armed guys boarded the bus and told all the guys to get off and line up in front of the bus. I remember the tension was thick as we followed orders. The soldiers crammed themselves inside the bus. We waited probably for what felt like forever. Eventually, they got off, and we all climbed back on and continued our trip. In the end, it was a whole lot of nothing, but I still remember my dad, the leader of our group, looking pale and sweating bullets the whole time. Edit 1. This was late 80s. We'd heard all kinds of horror stories before we left. Edit 2. To be clear, we rode the chicken bus, not the chicken itself. Edit 3. Okay, maybe they weren't actual machine guns, but they were definitely big guns. I was 12 and totally unarmed. If I had gotten shot, I guess it'd be comforting to know it was by a semi-automatic. That one Airbnb nightmare in Chicago. I was visiting Chicago from Seattle for a week and booked an Airbnb with a guy who said I'd be sharing the place with maybe 5 other people, which made sense since there were bunk beds in the room. The listing promised it was close to trains, in a decent neighborhood, and the house looked clean with a bunch of amenities. When I showed up, the place was nothing like that. It was run down and pretty filthy. The only thing the cleaning lady did was swap the sheets. Tons of appliances were broken, and the water wasn't even safe to drink. That was strike one. Then I realized there were at least 15 people crammed into the house. Those bunk beds? Turns out he had like 5 or 6 rooms packed with all sorts of bunk beds, with barely any space to walk. Nobody else in the house had any clue about these other rooms, and the listing never mentioned them. I dropped off my stuff to check out the city, and the neighborhood looked kinda sketchy, but I didn't think much of it. When I got back, one of the other guests was sitting on the porch waiting for an Uber Eats because he was too scared to walk down the street and get food himself. Turns out, the night before I arrived, 3 people from the house got mugged just walking 5 minutes from the train to the place. That night, 8 of us squeezed onto the floor of the tiny living room, which looked more like a small dining area with a broken couch and a busted TV, and we heard gunshots twice, about 8 to 10 shots each time, just a block away. I bounced straight to a hostel and had a nightmare trying to get a refund from Airbnb and that guy. Mike, seriously, screw you. How I managed to get myself into way too much trouble in Panama. So, a while back I was in Boquete, Panama with a friend. On our first night, we went out drinking with a group, but me and this girl kinda broke off to have some alone time. We were being dumb drunk, just hanging out in the middle of the road. Eventually, we decided to walk to a gas station to grab some cigarettes. Problem is, the gas stations are all on the edge of town, kinda sketchy. I stumble inside and start mixing up Spanish, French, and English trying to chat with the attendants. Then the girl comes in and tells me she found us a ride back to her hostel. Without thinking, I get into this white Escalade. Big mistake number 1. In Panama, the only people who drive Escalades are definitely not people you want to get stuck with. The driver? Picture a coked-out, 40-something ex-trophy wife who's totally hammered. Mistake number 2. Getting into a drunk stranger's car. The ride quickly gets weird. She's doing coke while driving and somehow doesn't spill any, and crying nonstop. Me and the girl ask to get out. She pulls over, the girl jumps out. Just as I'm about to follow, the driver tells me, "I lost my kids today. Stay with me for a minute." Drunk me thought it was a smart move to stay. I barely noticed she was driving me out of town. Then she makes a phone call and pulls over. That's when the biggest guy I've ever seen climbs into the back seat. The dude looks straight out of a movie. Thugged out, dead-eyed Panamanian, and stares at me like I'm a piece of meat. And there I am, drunk Canadian white guy, front seat passenger in a car full of bad vibes. I try to call my friend back at the hostel, but my phone's dead. Mistake number 3. Never go anywhere without a way to contact someone. The car keeps rolling out into the countryside, pulling up to a fancy house with Greek columns. My brain's screaming, "You've been kidnapped." Inside, there's an American dude with a nasty scar running from above his eye down to his lip. He's yelling at me, dragging me outside with the Panamanian guy, accusing me of being brought there to hook up with the ex-husband or something. After I explain what's been going down, he calms down and we end up chatting, drinking, and smoking weed. I'm trying hard to be cool to keep the peace. Then this guy whips out a kilo of coke to prove he's a drug runner, pulls a handgun, and starts telling me about his prison days and how he got his scar. He even offers to give me a matching scar to make a man out of me. I politely decline while thinking I might get carved up any second. The Panamanian woman comes back, pulls me aside, and tells me she knows what I am. An angel sent to help her kill herself and come with her to the afterlife. I'm like, no thanks. She insists. Take me to the other side. I laugh it off and bolt back inside. I tell the scarred American what just happened. He offers to drive me back to my hostel. Hell yes. I don't let the Panamanian woman drive. The whole ride back is through empty countryside, and I keep one hand on the seatbelt and one on the door handle, expecting them to pull over and off me at any moment. So yeah, I managed to make every mistake possible that night. Saw the American a few days later in town. He waved like we were buddies. I didn't stick around. I was walking along a main road in Barbados, heading back to where I was staying. It was late and pretty dark, not far from a popular beach on the south side. I came across this guy carrying a white bucket. "Hi, I'm Bush," he said. Inside the bucket were some plants, and he had a machete strapped to his side. "Got any food for me? Maybe some rice?" I told him I didn't have any food, but I did have some weed I could share. I'd picked some up from some kids at the beach the night before. "Follow me," Bush said. So, I followed this guy with a machete off the road into an empty lot. At the back of it, there was a little alleyway. We walked down the alley. A guy was sleeping against a wall, and a few broken-down cars were parked nearby. It was a dead end. I started thinking this might not be the best idea. At the end of the alley, Bush opened a door and brought out 2 chairs. Turns out this was his mom's place. Around us, there was a small garden made from the plants he'd collected in his bucket. We lit up. He took the first hit and immediately coughed. Ugh. This stuff is garbage. You feed this to the sheep. Held at machete point and almost kidnapped in Morocco. I was walking to a pharmacy down a pretty busy avenue in Rabat, Morocco. It was the Feast of the King, so most people were off work and school, which meant the street was basically empty. Me and 2 other volunteers, all young white women, were chatting as we walked. Out of nowhere, 2 guys on a motorbike came speeding the opposite way. They swerved over the median and pulled up right next to us. The guy in the back jumped off, walked toward us, and pulled a machete out from under his flannel shirt. One of my friends threw her purse, the other tossed her phone, and both took off running. The guy came after me. I grabbed my purse tight. It had my passport, wallet, phone, everything, and he held the machete right up to my neck. I told him a few sharp words in Arabic, something I'd learned from locals to keep kids in line at the orphanage where I was volunteering. Basically, shame on you by Allah. Suddenly, the guy looked like he'd just shit his pants. He went after the dropped phone and purse, and I took off running to the pharmacy as fast as I could. I ended up there crying, and my friends caught up with me. People started gathering. Some had seen it happen while driving by, others tried to help translate. A woman offered to drive us home after talking to the pharmacy security guard, so we got in a minivan. I gave directions in Arabic, but she drove right past the house, running stop signs and ignoring traffic lights. That's when we realized we were about to be kidnapped. One of my friends opened the door while the van was still moving, and we all jumped out. The night of the roaming swords. A few years ago, I think it was in 2001, I was having dinner with some friends at a restaurant in Bali. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and we had just spent a long day traveling and surfing. We were sitting there enjoying fresh seafood and swapping personal stories when we started to notice a couple of men walking up and down the street. They were dressed in white robes and carrying big swords. One of those men made the restaurant owner turn off all the lights inside the building. Then more of these robed men with shiny metal swords began to show up. Things got pretty hectic as they ran from place to place, shutting down all the lights. They even broke windows to get inside locked shops, where the owners had already gone home for the day. Cars were being pushed off the roads, and we were warned not to drive or risk getting killed. People were talking about animals being sacrificed and spirits or gods running loose. Our hotel was about a 15-minute drive from where we were, and we only knew one way to get there. So we started trying to figure out what to do next. The plan ended up being to start walking and try to find our way back. Even in a city, when all the lights go out, it gets really dark. The place we were staying at was a typical Balinese-style hotel, with a swimming pool in the middle that had a temple built right into it. It was only our second night in Bali, and we were thinking about moving somewhere nicer for the rest of our trip, but the place was clean, and at that moment, I just wanted to be back there. I kept going over the route in my head, trying to think of a way we could walk home safely. That plan involved climbing fences and crossing some dark fields. We were scared, but we were also ready for the adventure ahead. Slowly and carefully, we started walking down the sidewalk. Then we saw a familiar face. It was Wayan. He was a local guy who had helped us rent our car. He told us the spirit of Cali needed to find a new mask, which meant that goats and chickens were being killed in the streets as sacrifices. He also said there was no electricity anywhere, so cars could not be used either. He did not want us to leave our rental car at the restaurant, so he offered to drive us back in our own car. We were lucky. We jumped into the car, adrenaline pumping from this sudden change. Wayan started driving without any lights on. He said we could take a long way around the island to avoid trouble, but he did not really believe in the local religion. He decided to drive straight through the area where the sword-carrying men were. I got scared again when they stopped our car. Wayan talked with the armed men, then hit the gas. Our 4-cylinder micro SUV, loaded with a bunch of Americans, could not speed up faster than the guys could run. They swarmed the car and started hitting it hard. The car shook with all the yelling and banging, but finally, it picked up enough speed to break free. That was the end of it. We all got out alive. Later, I asked how often something like this happened. When was the last time Callie needed a new mask? An old man said, "Never in my lifetime." Since then, I have never really found out what happened. I asked some people we met while we were there, but nobody gave me a clear answer. Even searching online did not turn up anything.